Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV Around the World News. This is Ishra Jahan with the top stories. Prince Harry meets Barack Obama to promote Invictus Games. Nuclear weapons issue spoils Sharif's trip to the US. China warns US after warship sails by man-made islands. Russia detains director of Ukrainian library in Moscow. Tony Blair concedes link between Islamic State and Iraq war. Now the details. The prince met Mr. Barack Obama in the Oval Office of the White House for an informal chat. Earlier, he joined Michael Obama to meet injured service personnel in Virginia and is set to meet Games organizers at the British ambassador's residence in Washington, D.C. The Games are an international event for injured and sick service personnel. The first Invictus Games took place in London last year, with the next due in Orlando, Florida next year. Hesitant to run at first, he eventually gained support of the majority of Republicans in the Congress to succeed John Boehner of Ohio for the job. The 45-year-old Mr. Ryan was Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney's running mate in the 2012 election. He had helped determine budget and tax policy in Congress and said he only wanted the job to unify Republicans. In his new position, he will be second in line to the presidency, only behind the vice president. Among other responsibilities, the Speaker acts as presiding officer over the lower chamber of Congress for administrative and business matters. Pakistan wants peace, but it has no plans to slow down its nuclear weapons program either. That was the message from Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif this week in Washington. Problem is that desire has caused problems with the White House, so much that the Prime Minister's visit this week turned out to be nothing more than a courtesy visit. Pakistan's nuclear weapons program is growing quickly. In February, it launched an updated version of its long-range cruise missile, the RA-80, capable of carrying a nuclear warhead 350 km. A report published on Thursday in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists states that Pakistan has a stockpile of 110 to 130 warheads, up from 90 to 110 in 2011. In public remarks on Friday in Washington, Sharif told an audience that although Pakistan is fully committed to non-proliferation and disarmament, he accused neighboring India of a major arms buildup, adding that for no reason his country needs to take several countermeasures to preserve credible deterrence. He reiterated Pakistan's desire to become part of the Nuclear Suppliers Group, an organization of states that rubber-stamp the import and export of nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. But the US, like many other countries, is concerned about the growing nuclear arms race in South Asia and the proliferation of nuclear technology in the region. Moeed Yusuf, a South Asia analyst at the United States Institute of Peace, said the US-Pakistan relationship is a mess as a result. Defense Secretary Ash Carter said there would also be airstrikes against high-value targets. Observers say his comments reflect acknowledgement of the lack of progress in defeating the militant group. Separately, the US says Iraq is being invited for the first time to international talks over Syria's war. Mr. Carter's comments made to Senate Armed Services Committee come a week after US-Iraqi forces rescued dozens of hostages held by IS in Iraq. We won't hold back from supporting capable partners in opportunistic attacks against ISIL or conducting such missions directly, whether by strikes from the air or direct action of the ground, Mr. Carter said using an alternative acronym for IS. We expect to intensify our air campaign, including with additional US and coalition aircraft, to target ISIL with a higher and heavier rate of strikes, he said. This will include more strikes against ISIL high-value targets as our intelligence improves. A US-led coalition began airstrikes against IS positions in Iraq and Syria last year. President Barack Obama said the objective was to degrade and ultimately destroy IS. Although President Obama has not committed ground forces to Iraq, the US has about 3,500 troops in the country who have been helping to train Iraqi forces and has also a limited combat role. Russia started its own airstrikes in Syria at the end of last month, saying it wants to help President Bashar al-Assad defeat IS and other extremists. China has reacted angrily after US naval warships sailed through disputed waters of the South China Sea, saying the move threatened its sovereignty. A Chinese-guided missile destroyer and a naval patrol ship shadowed and gave warnings to the U.S. warship, according to law, China's defense ministry said on Tuesday. The U.S. patrol was a coercive action that seeks to militarize the South China Sea region and an abuse of freedom of navigation under international law, it added. Beijing said that the USS Lassen illegally entered Chinese territory when it sailed early on Tuesday near the Spratly or Nansha group of islands. The action threatened China's sovereignty and security interests, endangered the safety of staff and equipment on those islands, and harmed regional peace and stability. Foreign Ministry spokesman Li Kang said. Liu said Washington should correct the mistake immediately to avoid further harm to Chinese-U.S. relations. U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter, testifying on Tuesday to the Senate Armed Services Committee, said the USS Lassen had passed within 12 nautical miles of a Chinese artificial island. You can be completely unenthusiastic about Hillary Clinton and still be a feminist, tweeted Vice contributing editor Sarah Xiang. The blunt statement came on heels of the Clintons' strong performance in the first Democratic primary debate, striking a particularly disheartening note for the candidate who is losing ground with the one constituency that ought to be her own. A CNN overseas poll shows Clinton experiencing a nationwide slide among female voters from 75% in December 2014 down to 51% in August 2015. 8 years after her first presidential bid, her campaign narrative is taking a familiar turn. Hillary Clinton now has a woman problem. The headlines are eerily similar, as are the reasons offered for the disillusionment. Feminists are still unhappy as ever with her voting record. Clinton's controversial vote to authorize the Iraq War was held against her in 2008. Today, it's a late and grudging support for gay marriage. More damaging, however, are the continuing issues with her character. A Wall Street Journal NBC News poll conducted in August found that was just 34% of white women have a positive view of her, and 58% of women in a Fox News poll said that Clinton knowingly lied with regards to the ongoing email controversy surrounding her time as Secretary of State. Women don't seem to trust Hillary. Natalia Shahrina, who runs the Library of Ukrainian Literature, has been accused of inciting ethnic hatred. Investigators say they found books by radical nationalist Ukrainian author Dmytro Korchansky, whose works are banned in Russia. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry had protested against the search. This is not the first attempt by the Kremlin to label all things Ukrainian Russophobic and extremist, the ministry said in a statement. We call on the Russian authorities to hold pressure on the work of the library, a cultural center of the Ukrainian community. Russia's powerful investigative committee said a criminal case against Natalia Shahrina had been opened and investigations were continuing. The ex-PM said those of us who removed Saddam did bear some responsibility for the situation in Iraq today. But he again defended the invasion, saying it was hard to apologize for removing Saddam Hussein and that Iraq might have become like Syria otherwise. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said it was a Blair spin operation. Mr. Blair's comments come shortly before Sir John Chilcot announces a timetable for completion of his inquiry into the war. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the Russian Air Force could support the Free Syrian Army provided the US shares information about rebel positions. The FSA has so far been among the rebel groups targeted by Russian strikes, which have drawn Western criticism. Russia is a key ally of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. It has been bombing targets in Syria since last month and says it is primarily hitting IS positions. But Western powers say most of the airstrikes have hit the FSA and other factions backed by the West and Gulf states. In a TV interview, Mr. Lavrov said that the refusal of the US to coordinate their anti-terrorism campaign with Russia had been a big mistake. The foreign minister said that in addition, Russia was ready to support the FSA but was hampered in doing this because the US was refusing to provide information about rebel and IS positions. He said that a correct understanding of developments in war-torn Syria was emerging among Western politicians amid Europe's migrant crisis. The interview was recorded before talks on Friday and the US Secretary of State John Kerry in Vienna. The transcript was released on Saturday. Mr. Kerry said the talks had been constructive and that an expanded round of negotiations could take place next week. On Thursday, President Putin suggested the Syrian regime could be ready to work with some rebel groups against IS. Prime Minister Isa Mustafa said the agreement sealed Kosovo's path towards joining the EU. Kosovo split from Serbia in 2008, a decade after conflict between Serb forces and Kosovan Albanian rebels. Serbia has not recognized Kosovo's independence, but in August it signed key agreements to normalize ties, a condition for its own EU accession. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said the deal with Kosovo represented an important contribution to stability and prosperity in Kosovo and the region at large. The Stabilization and Association Agreement is the first step for non-EU countries on the path towards membership of the bloc. It requires the country concerned to ensure that its governance and civil society norms, for example, on human rights and the judiciary, are brought up to EU standards. It also involves a commitment to improve trade relations, with candidate countries having to open up their economies in return for EU help. It is the road of strengthening democracy and building the rule of law, the road of political stability and economic prosperity, said Mr. Mustafa. In Serbia, the head of Government Office for Kosovo, Marko Djirić, said the agreement does not and never will mean to us that our province is a separate state. However, Serbia too is keen to join the EU, and Prime Minister Aleksandar Vučić said the country's deal to normalize ties with Kosovo meant there were no longer any obstacles in his country's path. Mr. Abbott made the comments in London, where he was speaking at the second annual Margaret Thatcher Lecture. He said misguided altruism was leading much of Europe into catastrophic error. Under Mr. Abbott, Australia introduced border controls that stopped migrant boats reaching the country. Hundreds of thousands of people have now fled conflicts in the Middle East, mostly Syria, and sought asylum in European countries. The UN says most arrivals are not economic migrants, but people fleeing war and persecution. Most are arriving by boat before walking across Europe. In his first major speech since being ousted by his party, Mr. Abbott said, "No country or continent can open its borders to all comers without fundamentally weakening itself." He was speaking to an audience of ministers and members of the governing Conservative Party at London's Guildhall. There are tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of people living in poverty and danger who might readily seek to enter a Western country if the opportunity is there, Mr. Abbott said. Who could blame them? Yet no country or continent can open its borders to all comers without fundamentally weakening itself. This is the risk that the countries of Europe had now run through misguided altruism, Mr. Abbott said, according to a copy of his speech. A militia spokesman told the BBC the helicopter was shot down in the Almaty coastal region, which has seen clashes between rival militias. The helicopter had been carrying cash for a local bank on the way out and was returning with passengers to Tripoli. Local media say the dead may include high-ranking militia members. Bank workers were also reportedly on board. The civilian bank staff were from the town of Sarman. The militia spokesman said, Libya has been hit by instability since the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, with numerous militias each governing their own patches of territory. Reports say some 900 students are attending the session at Indian Institute of Technology. Last month, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the headquarters of Facebook in California. With more than 130 million users, India is Facebook's largest market outside the United States. Mr. Zuckerberg gave a short speech before taking questions from the students on Wednesday. Last month, Mr. Modi hailed the political power of social media during his visit to the Facebook headquarters. Mr. Modi has said he wants to connect all India's villages to the internet. Around a billion Indians currently lack internet access. Facebook says its Internet organization project, which offers free access to a bundle of mobile phone web apps, can help get the developing world online. But it has drawn criticism in India, accused of favoring Facebook over local services. Mr. Zuckerberg had promised to open the scheme to a wider range of apps. Mr. Zuckerberg visited Taj Mahal on Tuesday. It is even more stunning than I expected. It's incredible what people can build and what love can motivate us to build, he wrote on Facebook. Viewers, will take a short break. Stay with us. We are back in a moment with the headlines here. China signs deal to buy 130 Airbus aircraft during Merkel visit. Syria conflict, Saudis say Iran must accept Assad exit. North Koreans sent abroad into forced labor, says UN. Philippine legislators angered by Manila bullet scam. Indian hanged girls, court rejects probe ruling out rape.
Information.
Let's move to the next news. The deal was announced after a meeting between German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing. The contract includes 30 wide-body A330s and 100 narrow-body 320s. Earlier this year, Airbus agreed to build a new assembly facility in China's northern port of Tianjin. The company is engaged in a battle with US-based Boeing for dominance in the growing Chinese market. We are grateful to CAS, one of our longest-standing customers, for its continued confidence in Airbus and in the versatile A330 family as well as the best-selling A320 family, said Airbus President Fabrice Breger in a statement. In August, Boeing said China was expected to add 6,330 new aircraft to its commercial fleet by 2034. Airbus has headquarters in Germany and France. Saudi Foreign Minister Adil Al-Zubair made the remarks as talks among international foreign ministers on the crisis get underway in Vienna. Iran is for the first time taking part in such talks, which will also include Russia and Turkey. Russia and Iran both support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. They have both recently stopped up their military role in the conflict. The US, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf Arab nations have long insisted Mr. Assad cannot play any long-term role in Syria's future. Mr. Zubair told the BBC that there was no doubt Mr. Assad had to go. He will go either through a political process or he will be removed by force, he said. Earlier, American Secretary of State John Kerry said the US was intensifying diplomatic efforts to end the hell of Syria's civil war, even as it increases support for moderate rebels. Foreign ministers from the UK, France, Germany, Egypt, Lebanon and the EU has also confirmed they will attend the meeting, and other Middle Eastern powers are also expected. Marzuki Darusman had said workers earn very little and underfed and are sometimes forced to work up to 20-hour days. Employers pay significantly higher amounts directly to the North Korean government, he says in his report. The majority of the workers are in China and Russia, mainly in the mining, textile and construction industries. But Mr. Darusman, the special reporter on human rights in North Korea, also listed countries in Asia, Africa, the Middle East and Europe. He said the companies who hire North Korean workers become complicit in an unacceptable system of forced labor. The workers are providing a source of hard currency to a country in a really tight financial and economical situation. He estimated that North Korea was earning $1.2 billion to $2.3 billion from the foreign worker system every year. Since 2006, North Korea had been under international sanction for its nuclear weapons tests, resulting in a shortage of foreign currency. The bullet scam allegedly sees bullets dropped into the luggage of passengers as they go through security at the country's main airport. Passengers are then required to pay a fine or face being charged with illegal possession of ammunition. An overseas Filipino worker and Japanese tourist are the latest to complain. This is becoming an international embarrassment, said Sherwin Gatchalian, vice chairman of the tourism committee in the House of Representatives. Senator Ralph Rector stressed the need for intervention from authorities, adding, "There is no working system that is girding the girds." Gloria Ortiz, an overseas Filipino worker, was stopped from flying to Hong Kong after a bullet was found in her hand luggage at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. Ortiz denied the bullet was hers, saying she would never carry one because of Hong Kong's strict security laws. Office of Transportation Security personnel released her after several days in police detention. Japanese tourist Kazunobu Sakamoto was found with 2 bullets in his luggage and arrested after failing to show documents authorizing him to carry ammunition. The reports have caused outrage, with locals criticizing airport authorities. Mr. Gatchalian condemned OTS staff, saying they were not afraid to prey on foreigners. Some of the passengers detained were released after the bullets were found to be blanks, while others were taken to court for refusing to pay fines. Surveillance at the airport has been stopped up since the complaints began, and an investigation has been launched into the personnel accused of involvement. The police reports say the girls killed themselves out of shame after one of the sisters was seen with a boy. But the girl's parents had accused the Central Bureau of Investigation of trying to fudge the case. Rights groups and their relatives said many questions remained unanswered. The lower caste cousins, thought to have been 14 and 15, were found hanged from a mango tree on 28 May 2014 in Uttar Pradesh. The initial reports that the girls had been gang raped and murdered by a group of men from the same village sparked global outrage. A local post-mortem examination initially confirmed multiple sexual assaults and death due to hanging. Couples will now be allowed to have 2 children, it said, citing a statement from the Communist Party. The controversial policy was introduced nationally in 1979 to slow the population growth rate. It is estimated to have prevented about 400 million births. However, concern at China's aging population led to pressure for change. Couples who violated the one-child policy faced a variety of punishments, from fines and the loss of employment to forced abortions. Over time, the policy has been relaxed in some provinces as demographers and sociologists raised concerns about rising social costs and falling worker numbers. The Pakistan government said it will offer relief and compensation to survivors of Monday's powerful earthquake. Officials said at least 10,000 homes were destroyed by the earthquake, which struck Pakistan and northern Afghanistan. One of Pakistan's worst hit regions was Shangla district, where 50 people died. The BBC's Shahjab Jillani visited some of its remote mountainous villages. She is the second reason to hold the mainly ceremonial role. The 50-year-old is currently the vice chair of the ruling Communist Party of Nepal United Marxist-Leninist. Ms. Bhandari was defense minister from 2009 to 2011. As president, she has promised to champion minority and women's rights in Nepal. Earlier this month, Nepal's parliament chose its new prime minister, KP Sharma Oli. PM Varghava said he would meet the Home Secretary and return the Padma Bhushan he was awarded in 1986. On Wednesday, a group of 10 filmmakers returned their national awards in protest at what they called a rising climate of intolerance. Several writers have also returned awards in protest of recent weeks. They point to the killings of rationalists such as Malashappa Kalbargi and Kovid Pansari this year as evidence to that there is a growing assault on free speech in India. Many are also anguished over by the lynching of a 50-year-old Muslim man in northern India by a mob allegedly over rumors that his family had been storing and consuming beef at home. Critics of India's Bharatiya Janata Party government say it has not done enough to counter extremists and protect freedom of expression. On Thursday, announcing his decision to return the Padma Bhushan, Mr. Varghava, founder director of the Center of Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, said religious beliefs were personal choices and should not interfere in politics. This award was very dear to me. I have received over 100 awards, but this is the only one I received from the government. But I'm giving it away without any hesitation because at this moment, the climate is such that we have many concerns, he told. The government is moving away from the path of democracy and moving on a path of religion. We are making the country into a Hindu religious autocracy. Our constitution demands that we possess scientific temper and a commitment to reason, but our government is now moving away from a scientific temper and reason, he added. Mr. Varghava, who is also a recipient of the French Legion of Honor, is the latest addition to the long list of filmmakers and authors who have returned official awards in recent weeks. The government is planning an underground rail network alongside the metro rail project in Dhaka in a bid to ease the traffic. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina ordered the Planning Commission on Thursday to ready a project for this. Planning Minister AHM Mustafa Kamal said after EC-NSC meeting we will conduct a survey soon in this regard. Later, a project will be prepared based on the results, he said. However, the plan came just after the government is gearing up to metro rail project in Dhaka. He said the government is considering starting this project along with metro rail project. Asked about the funding for the new project, the Prime Minister said the World Bank's State Senior Vice President Kylie Peters had expressed interest to fund it during his recent visit. At present, government is conducting geological survey for metro rail on the Uttara-Agargaon route to be put in place by 2019. The estimated cost for the project is 220 billion taka. JIC is providing 165.95 billion taka and the government will fund the rest. Viewers, now the business news. Gross domestic product grew at an annualized pace of 1.5% between July and September, according to the Department of Commerce, down from a rate of 3.9% in the second quarter. The slowdown was partly due to companies running down stockpiles of goods in their warehouse. On Wednesday, the Federal Reserve kept rates unchanged and said the economy was expanding at a moderate pace. Low oil prices have hit U.S. energy firms so far this year, but lower fuel prices have been good news for consumer spending, which accounts for more than two-thirds of U.S. economic activity. Consumer spending grew at 3.2% in the third quarter, down from 3.6% in the second, but still a strong reading. Germany's biggest bank said it would cut 9,000 full-time jobs and 6,000 contractor roles. It is also planning to sell business employing 20,000 people over the next 2 years. By 2018, we expect to see the benefits of our hard work and potentially be in the midst of a powerful turnaround, said John Cryan, co-chief executive. The cuts represent just less than 15% of the firm's total workforce. The bank's shares fell 5.5% in Frankfurt trading. Deutsche is trying to cut 3.8 billion euro of annual costs of European banks struggle with sluggish economic growth in their home markets and stricter regulations. Viewers, now the sports news. United lost a penalty shootout to Middlesbrough in the League Cup on Wednesday after a goalless 120 minutes at Old Trafford. Scholes praised United's defense, saying that they are coached brilliantly but bemoaned the team's style of play. There's a lack of creativity and risk, said Scholes, who played 718 games for United. Speaking to BBC Radio Manchester, he added, "It's a team now you wouldn't want to play against because they are tightly organized. But it seems Van Gaal doesn't play players to beat men, and it's probably not a team I have enjoyed playing in." Bangladesh Cricket Board has announced the schedule for the South African women's cricket team's tour to Bangladesh. The visitor will play 3 ODIs and 4 T20s against Bangladesh's women's cricket team in November at the Sheikh Kamal International Cricket Stadium, Cox's Bazar. The Proteas will arrive in Dhaka on Tuesday, November 3rd. The first ODIs match will be held on Friday. The second and third ODIs will be held on November 8th and 9th. The 4 T20s matches are scheduled to be held on November 12th, 13th, 15th and 16th. Viewers, let's have a look at Millennium TV Around the World News Recap. Prince Harry meets Barack Obama to promote Invictus Games. Nuclear weapons issue spoils Sharif's trip to the US. China warns US after warship sails by man-made islands. Russia detains director of Ukrainian library in Moscow. Tony Blair concedes link between Islamic State and Iraq war. You are up to date with the top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you and stay with Millennium TV. Allah Hafiz.